Good afternoon, Capricorn, and welcome to Mary's Angel Tarot. If you're here today, trust that this reading found you for a reason. Let's discover the guidance the universe has prepared for you. There's a heaviness sitting on someone's chest right now, and it has your name all over it. Not a poetic heaviness, not a metaphorical weight that sounds beautiful in a love song and then dissolves by the chorus. I'm talking about the kind of ache that makes a person press their hand against their sternum without realizing they're doing it, as if they could physically hold together something that keeps threatening to come apart. Someone out there is hurting because of you, and the hurt isn't the clean, simple kind that comes from a single wound with a clear cause. It's the complicated kind, the layered kind. The kind that has roots in regret and longing and the slow, nauseating realization that they may have lost someone who cannot be replaced. And the thing that makes it worse, the thing that keeps the wound from healing and the thoughts from quieting, is that they did this to themselves. They know it. They replay the decisions, the moments, the words said or left unsaid, and every time they reach the same conclusion, this pain they're carrying is not something that was done to them. It's something they built, one careless choice at a time, until they turned around and you were gone. I need you to understand who we're talking about, because the word player in the context of this message is doing important work. This is someone who moved through their emotional life like a game. Not necessarily because they were malicious, not because they woke up every morning with a deliberate plan to manipulate and discard, but because they developed a style of relating to people, especially to you, that prioritized their own comfort, their own freedom, their own options above the feelings of the person standing in front of them. They kept doors open that should have been closed. They made promises with their energy that their actions never honored. They created intimacy in controlled doses, giving you just enough to keep you invested while withholding just enough to maintain their own sense of independence. And for a while, it worked. The game functioned exactly as designed. They got to enjoy the warmth of your presence, the depth of your attention, the comfort of knowing someone cared about them profoundly without ever having to fully commit to the vulnerability that real love demands. They had you in their life on terms that served them, and those terms, whether spoken or unspoken, required you to accept less than what you deserved. But something happened that they didn't account for in their calculations. You left not just physically, although that may be part of it, you left energetically. There was a moment, maybe one you can pinpoint, and maybe one that happened so gradually you only recognized it in retrospect when something inside you shifted. The part of you that had been willing to accept their half presence, their conditional affection, their 1 foot in, 1 foot out version of being with you, that part went quiet. Not with anger, not with a dramatic declaration, with something far more devastating to someone who has been taking you for granted. With peace, you found a kind of stillness inside yourself that no longer needed them to fill the space they'd been inconsistently occupying. And when that shift happened, when your energy stopped reaching for theirs, they felt it, not immediately. Players are often the last to notice what they're losing because their attention is distributed across too many sources to register the loss of any single one. But eventually, in a moment of quiet, in a gap between distractions, they reached for the feeling of you and found it gone. And that absence hit them with a force that no amount of game playing had prepared them for. What I want to describe to you now is what their inner world looks like right now, because I think if you could see it, some of the residual anger or hurt you carry toward this person would soften into something more complex. Not forgiveness, necessarily, not yet, but a recognition that the pain isn't only on your side of this equation. Their mind has become a loop that they cannot exit. It runs continuously from the moment they open their eyes to the moment exhaustion finally pulls them into fitful, unsatisfying sleep. The loop plays variations of the same footage, memories of you, specific moments that they cataloged without knowing they were cataloging them, stored in some deep vault of their consciousness that has now been broken open. The way you looked at them when you still believed in what you had, the sound of your laugh, not the polite one you used in public, but the real one, the unguarded one that only came out when something genuinely delighted you. The particular quality of silence that existed between you in comfortable moments, that silence that felt like its own kind of conversation. All of these memories are playing on repeat, and each repetition adds another layer of realization about what they had and how thoroughly they failed to honor it. There's a specific thing about you that is haunting this person, and I want to name it because I think it's something you've undervalued about yourself. It's your authenticity. In a world full of people performing versions of themselves, in a social landscape cluttered with curated images and strategic self-presentation, you offered this person something rare. You were real with them. Not performatively real, not the kind of vulnerability that's actually a sophisticated form of impression management, but genuinely, uncomfortably, beautifully real. You let them see parts of you that you don't show to anyone else. The insecurities you usually keep hidden, the dreams you usually play down, the fears you usually power through without acknowledging. You gave them access to the unedited version of yourself, and at the time, they didn't fully register how extraordinary that was because they were too busy keeping their own mask firmly in place. But now, in the aftermath, in the aching quiet of your absence, they understand exactly what you offered them. And the understanding is devastating because they know, with the crystal clarity that only loss provides, that they may never be offered anything like it again. People don't open like that easily. People don't hand someone the key to their most private self without enormous courage and trust. And this person took that key and treated it like a trinket, something interesting to have but not something to be guarded as the precious, irreplaceable offering it was. Let me take you into their nights, because nighttime is when the game fully collapses and the real feelings emerge without anywhere to hide. During the day, they can manage. They can distract themselves with activity, with social interaction, with the 100 small tasks that make up a functioning life. But at night, when the distractions run out and the silence closes in, your absence becomes a physical sensation. It sits in the room with them. It occupies the space where your voice used to be, where your warmth used to be, where the particular energy you carry used to soften the hard edges of their day. And in that silence, things surface that they spend all day pushing down. They wonder where you are, who you're talking to, whether you're laughing that real laugh with someone else, whether someone new is receiving the authenticity that they squandered. That thought, the thought of someone else experiencing what they lost, produces a specific kind of pain that I can only describe as existential jealousy, not the petty possessive jealousy of someone who wants to control you. The deep, grieving jealousy of someone who recognizes that the most precious thing they ever held passed through their careless fingers and may now be held by hands that will treat it with the reverence it always deserved. Something I need to address is the role that alcohol or substances may be playing in this person's current coping. There's an energy here that suggests they're numbing. not necessarily in a dramatic, destructive way, maybe in the quiet, socially acceptable way that people numb when the pain is too persistent to sit with sober and extra drink at night. A reliance on distraction that borders on compulsive. A filling of every silent moment with noise, because silence has become synonymous with your absence, and your absence has become synonymous with a reckoning they're not ready to face. This numbing is not a sign that they don't care. Paradoxically, it's evidence of how much they do. People don't numb what doesn't hurt. They don't avoid what doesn't matter. The very intensity of their avoidance is a measure of the intensity of the feeling underneath it. And the feeling underneath it, the one they're drinking away or distracting away or sleeping away, is the raw, unprocessed grief of having lost you, combined with the equally raw, equally unprocessed shame of knowing they caused the loss. I want to peel back another layer here, because the story of this person's pain has a dimension that might change how you understand the entire dynamic. This person was not always a player. They were made into one. Somewhere in their history, probably long before you entered the picture, they experienced a form of love that taught them terrible lessons. They learned that being fully invested in one person was a recipe for annihilation. They learned that the person who cares less holds the power. They learned that vulnerability is an invitation for destruction. And those lessons, absorbed during a period of genuine pain, became the blueprint for every romantic interaction that followed. The game wasn't just a preference or a personality trait. It was a survival strategy, a way of engaging with love without ever fully entering the arena where love could hurt them the way it hurt them before. And you, with your openness and your authenticity and your willingness to love without armor, represented the most dangerous thing imaginable to that survival strategy. You represented the possibility that love could actually be safe, that someone could be trusted with the full weight of their heart. And instead of embracing that possibility, they did what wounded people do. They tested it. They pushed against it. They introduced instability to see if you would stay. And when you did stay, instead of feeling secure, they pushed harder, because the staying confused the part of them that believed love always leaves. It was only when you finally did leave, when you confirmed the very belief they'd been unconsciously trying to prove, that they realized the confirmation brought no relief, only devastation. Now, I want to redirect this message toward you, because as much as I've been describing this person's inner world, this message is ultimately about you and how you navigate this situation. The fact that someone is hurting over you, thinking about you obsessively, drowning in regret, does not obligate you to do anything. Let me say that again, because I know your compassionate heart might be starting to soften toward this person as you hear about their pain. Their pain does not create an obligation for you. You are not responsible for rescuing someone from the consequences of how they treated you. Compassion and responsibility are different things. You can acknowledge that they're suffering. You can even feel genuine empathy for that suffering without concluding that the appropriate response is to go back and make it stop. Because going back, re-entering a dynamic that was structured around your willingness to accept less, is not compassion. It's self-abandonment dressed up as kindness. And you have already spent too much of your life in that costume. Here's what I want you to examine honestly. There's a part of you, and I can feel its pulse in your energy right now, that is quietly gratified by this person's pain. Not in a cruel way, not in a vindictive, I hope they suffer way, in a deeply human, deeply understandable, I mattered more than they showed me way. Their pain is validating something you needed validated. It's confirming that you weren't crazy for feeling the depth of connection you felt. It's proving that the bond was real, even when their behavior made you question whether you'd imagined the whole thing. And that validation matters. After spending time in a dynamic where your perception was subtly undermined by someone's inconsistency, where the gap between what you felt and what they showed you made you question your own emotional intelligence, learning that they feel it too, that they always felt it but were too afraid or too selfish or too broken to honor it, is a form of emotional justice that your psyche genuinely needed. So let yourself have that. Let the validation land, but don't let it become a reason to reopen a door that you closed for good reasons. Something else I want to illuminate is the transformation that their pain is catalyzing within them, because it's real, even if it's incomplete. This person is, for possibly the first time in their adult life, confronting the actual consequences of their emotional patterns. Every previous relationship that ended because of their game playing confirmed their belief that love doesn't last. But your ending is different. Your ending is forcing them to see that love didn't leave. They pushed it out. The distinction between love failing and love being failed by their behavior is one they've never had to sit with before, and it's restructuring their entire understanding of their romantic history. They're starting to see that the pattern of loss in their life wasn't evidence that they were unlovable or that commitment was a trap. It was the predictable outcome of treating precious connections as disposable. That realization is painful, but it's also the beginning of genuine change, not the performative change that people promise when they're afraid of losing someone. The deep, cellular, identity-level change that only happens when the pain of staying the same finally exceeds the pain of transformation. But, and this is crucial, their transformation is their journey, not yours. You did not come into this world to be the catalyst that finally teaches a wounded person how to love properly. That's a narrative that romanticizes suffering and positions you as a supporting character in someone else's growth story when you should be the protagonist of your own. Whatever this person learns from losing you, whatever growth occurs in the crucible of their regret, that's their harvest to reap. Your harvest is different. Your harvest is the wisdom you gained about your own patterns, the clarity about what you will and won't accept, the strengthened relationship with your own worth that emerged from the wreckage of accepting less. Those are your treasures, and they were expensive. You paid for them with your time, your tears, your trust, and your emotional energy. Don't give them back by returning to the dynamic that produced them. I want to talk about what's happening in your own emotional landscape right now, because this message isn't landing in a vacuum. You have feelings about this person that are more complicated than you might want to admit. There's anger, yes. There's relief at having freed yourself. But there's also something else, something softer and more inconvenient that lives beneath the anger and the relief. You miss them, not the version of them that played games, not the version that kept you in a state of anxious uncertainty. You miss the version that showed up in rare, unguarded moments, the version that existed in the brief windows when their walls came down and you caught a glimpse of who they actually were beneath all the posturing. That version was real. It wasn't a trick or a performance. It was the truest part of them, the part that your soul connected with, the part that made you stay long past the point when your rational mind was telling you to leave. And the grief of losing that version, even while knowing that the dominant version was harmful to you, is one of the most confusing and painful emotional experiences a person can have. grieving someone who is still alive, mourning a potential that was never fully realized, missing a ghost of a person who only appeared intermittently in flashes, too brief to hold but too vivid to forget. That grief deserves space. It deserves to be felt without judgment and without the pressure to resolve it quickly. You don't have to be over this person on anyone's timeline, including your own. The heart doesn't operate on schedules. It processes at the speed it processes, and rushing it only drives the unfinished feelings underground, where they resurface later in unexpected and often destructive ways. So if you still think about them, that's okay. If you still feel a pang when something reminds you of them, that's okay. If there are moments, especially at night, when your own distractions thin out, when the missing becomes so acute that you have to resist the urge to reach for your phone, that is okay. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean the decision to distance yourself was wrong. It means you loved someone with depth and sincerity, and the echo of that love takes time to fade. Possibly a long time. And there is no failure in that. Only evidence of a heart that knows how to commit, even when the commitment wasn't reciprocated with equal intensity. Here on Mary's Angel Tarot, I want to take this to a level that I think is going to reframe the entire situation for you. What if this person's purpose in your life was never to be your forever? What if the role they were cast to play in your story was not romantic partner but catalyst? What if every confusing moment, every inconsistency, every time they pulled you close only to push you away, was not a malfunction in the relationship, but the relationship functioning exactly as it was designed to, as a mechanism for activating something inside you that could not have been activated any other way? Consider the person you were before them. Consider the tolerance you had for being treated as optional. Consider the stories you told yourself about why love had to involve so much uncertainty and pain. Now consider who you are after, the boundaries you've built, the self-knowledge you've gained, the fierce, quiet declaration you've made to yourself and to the universe that you will never again shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's ambivalence. That transformation did not happen in spite of this person. It happened because of them. They were the fire that forged the sword of your self-worth, and while the burning was agonizing, the blade that emerged is something no one will ever take from you. There's an energy around you right now that this person can feel from wherever they are, and it's driving them absolutely mad. It's the energy of someone who has come home to themselves, someone who no longer needs external validation to feel whole, someone whose center of gravity has shifted from out there to in here. That energy is magnetic in a way that no amount of physical beauty or social charm can replicate, because it signals something primal. It signals wholeness. And wholeness, to someone who has been running from their own emptiness for years, is both the most attractive and the most terrifying thing imaginable. This person is drawn to your wholeness the way a moth is drawn to a flame, and with approximately the same level of strategic planning. They can't help it. The pull is involuntary. And the fact that you achieved this wholeness partly by walking away from them adds a layer of bitter irony to their obsession. The very act that proved you didn't need them is the act that made them realize how desperately they need you. I want to speak now to what happens next, because the energy of this situation is not static. It's building toward something. This person is approaching a breaking point where the internal pressure of unexpressed feelings is going to force some kind of external action. They're going to reach out. It might be direct or it might be oblique. It might be a message that tries to sound casual while carrying the weight of everything they've been unable to say. It might be a sudden appearance in your physical space, something they'll try to make look coincidental, but that required more courage than you'll ever know. However it manifests, the contact is coming, and when it does, you're going to be faced with a moment that requires absolute clarity about what you want and what you're willing to accept. Let me help you prepare for that moment by being very honest about what this person is and isn't capable of right now. They are capable of feeling genuine regret. That's real. They are capable of recognizing what they lost. That's real too. They are probably even capable of articulating with heartbreaking sincerity all the ways they took you for granted and all the changes they want to make. But capability and consistency are different things. The question is not whether they feel what they feel right now in the acute phase of loss and regret. The question is whether the structures that created the game-playing behavior have actually been dismantled, or whether the pain of losing you has temporarily overridden them without actually removing them. Because if the structures are still intact, what you'll get is a passionate reunion followed by a gradual return to the same dynamic. The walls will go back up, the inconsistency will creep back in. The game will resume, perhaps in a subtler form, but with the same essential architecture. And the second loss, the one that comes after you've allowed yourself to hope again, is always worse than the first. So when the contact comes, and it will, I want you to listen not just to their words, but to the energy behind the words. Words are easy. People in pain become remarkably eloquent about the changes they intend to make, but energy doesn't lie. Energy reveals whether someone has genuinely transformed or whether they're performing transformation because the alternative, a life without you, is too painful to accept in this moment. There's a difference between a person who has done the internal work and a person who is simply motivated by desperation. The former shows up with humility, patience, and a willingness to earn trust over time without demanding immediate reconciliation. The latter shows up with intensity, urgency, and a subtle pressure to make a decision before you've had time to think clearly. Know the difference. It will save you. I want to close this message by speaking directly to the part of you that still loves this person, because that part is real and it deserves acknowledgement rather than suppression. You can love someone and still choose not to be with them. You can hold tenderness for a person and simultaneously hold firm on the boundary that their behavior made necessary. You can wish them well, genuinely and sincerely, while wishing them well from a distance that protects your peace. Love and proximity are not the same thing. Love and tolerance of mistreatment are not the same thing. Love and self-sacrifice are not the same thing. The most evolved form of love, the one that honors both yourself and the other person, is the love that says, I see your pain, I acknowledge our connection, and I trust that the highest good for both of us requires me to hold this boundary with compassion rather than collapse it with sentiment. You are thought about constantly by someone who is learning, through the excruciating education of your absence, what they had. That knowledge does not diminish your power, it confirms it. You are unforgettable not because you tried to be, but because who you are, the real, unperformable, irreducible essence of you, is the kind of thing that imprints itself on the people who get close enough to experience it. This person got close enough, and now they carry the imprint, and the imprint aches, and the aching is their teacher. Let it teach them. Meanwhile, you continue forward into your wholeness, into your worth, into the life that opens up when you stop waiting for someone to recognize your value and start living as though your value is self-evident, because it is. It always was. And the fact that someone is losing their mind over you right now is not the confirmation, it's just the echo of what was already true. All right, thank you so much for watching Mary's Angel Tarot. Take care of your energy, and I'll see you in the next reading. Bye.